Alright guys, so in the last video we went ahead and created the profile component. Okay, it's not doing much for us, it's just spitting out the word profile, but we have it set up and nested into our app component. So now what I want to do is start to create the service to interact with the GitHub API. So in our app folder, let's go ahead and create another folder called services. Okay, and then inside there we're going to create a new file and we're going to save this as GitHub github.service.ts. Alright, and there's a few things we need to do here. We need to import the injectable utility, and that's going to allow us to add this service as a dependency using dependency injection. So that's going to be from Angular/core. Okay, we're also going to be using the HTTP module because we need to make an HTTP GET request to GitHub. So we're going to say import HTTP and also headers, and that's going to be from Angular/HTTP. And then the last thing I want to import is we're going to be using observables, which are part of reactive extensions, and we want to use a method called map that will allow us to map our observable response into our component. So we're going to say, actually we don't need those, we're going to say import rx.js, which is reactive extensions /add/operator/map, and that's going to be that's not from anything. That should be fine. Okay, now since we're using injectable, we have to just add the decorator injectable, and then we can put our class. So let's say export class, and it's going to be called GitHub service. Alright, now let's set a property of username here. And the reason you're seeing this line is because we didn't add a type to it, so let's make it a string. Alright, and then what we want to do is add a constructor. Okay, and let's say this dot username. What I'm going to do is just set it to a default for now. I'm going to set it to my own. Okay, I also want to just put a console log here, and we'll just say GitHub service ready. Alright, so let's just save that. And now what we want to do is bring this into our component and into our application. So let's go to app.component.ts, and let's go ahead and import it. So we're going to say import GitHub service, and that's going to be from ./services/github.service. Okay, so that'll bring it in. Now when we are adding another component, we add it as a directive. When we're using a service, we need to add it as a provider. So we're going to say providers and set GitHub service. Alright, now I think actually that should do it. So let's save it. And then we're going to go into our profile component TS. And we also want to import it here. So for the path, we're in the components folder now. That means we have to go outside of it. So we're going to do // and then into services and then GitHub.service. Alright, we don't have to add it as a provider here because we already did that in the main app component. What we do have to do is inject the service as a dependency. Okay, and if you've used Angular 1, dependency injection is a little different. What we have to do is put it inside of the constructor parameter. Okay, so we're going to say constructor, and then inside the parameters here, we're going to say private underscore GitHub service, and we're going to set that to GitHub service. All right, if you don't use private, you'll only be able to use this in the constructor. If you want to be able to use the service anywhere else inside the component, you have to add private. All right, let's go ahead and save that. And then if we look down here in the console, we're now seeing GitHub service ready. So we know that it's connected and we know that it's ready. Now we want to be able to get the profile info for our user. So let's go back into the service and let's write a function to do that. So we're going to call this getUser, and we're going to return, and we're going to use the HTTP module. Now in order to do that, we have to inject that as well up here in the constructor. So again, we'll do private underscore HTTP. That's going to be equal to HTTP, okay, which is being imported right here. So now we can say this dot underscore HTTP, and we want to make a get request, so we're going to say get, and then in here we want to put the URL, so HTTP, and it's going to be api.github.com/users/ and then we need to put in the username. So what I'll do is concatenate with a plus sign and then say this dot username, which is going to get whatever is right here. All right, now we're using an observable, so in order to map, we're going to use the map function. So let's go right here and say dot map, and let's see, inside here we're going to say res for the response, and that's going to be JSON, so we want it to go to res.json. Alright, so that's going to return the observable. Let's save this. So what we need to do is grab that response in our profile component. So to do that, let's go back to profile component TS, and we also want to bring in the map function here. So let's say import rxjs/add operator map. And then down here in the constructor, we now have access to that service. So we're going to say this dot underscore GitHub service. And remember, we called that function getUser. All right, so now what we can do is, since we're mapping that observable response, we can use subscribe to get that data. So let's say dot subscribe, and then in here we'll say user to a code block, and let's just do console.log user. Let's save it, and let's see what we get down here. Okay, so no provider for HTTP. So what we need to do is go to our main app component, and we're going to go ahead and import the HTTP providers. And that's going to be from Angular HTTP, and then we're just going to add it down here. And let's save that. And now if we look down here, you can see we're getting an object with the login of Brad Traversy, ID, avatar URL. Okay, if we extend that, you can see we're getting all types of information. We're getting the create date, the email, for the number of followers, gists, public repos. So we're getting a lot of stuff here, and we can actually bring this stuff into our application. So that's what we're going to do in the next video.